Welcome to the Fabulous at 50 podcast, where we are changing the aging narrative. I'm your host, Joanne Newduck, and I'm thrilled to bring you stories that matter and celebrate your place in the world. As an advocate for lifelong learning, health, and women's empowerment, I believe it's never too late to live the life you've always imagined. Through lively and informative interviews with inspiring guests, we'll explore a wide range of topics relevant to our global sisterhood of vibrant, inquiring women just like you. Join me for today's episode, and let's start changing the aging narrative together. Hey everyone, I'm so excited you're joining us for today's episode. I have a wonderful guest here, but I just want to read you a stat that just kind of blew me away. Over 72% of seniors over the age of 85 are living in the community with complex chronic conditions, yet only 16%, that's a very small amount, are receiving publicly subsidized housing support and services. So what are the rest doing, and what can they do? That's what we're going to be talking about today with my wonderful guest, Stephanie Chan. She lives in Vancouver, Canada, and she's been working in the senior living industry for over 16 years. She also happens to be the owner of Home to Home and myCareBase, which is a really interesting platform. I'd never heard of it before, and I'm super excited to learn about these options because maybe one of these seniors is one of your loved ones. Do you have an elderly parent or aunt, or maybe you're starting to think about what's going to happen to yourself? So Stephanie, welcome to today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joanne.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So let's just dive right in.
Mhm.
When we had a little bit of a pre-talk, I was quite fascinated by what is my care base? Like what's that all
Yeah.
about?
It is a new platform to help families with finding, hiring, and managing home care, essentially. In a nutshell, that's what it is. And so it's a marketplace platform where they can find vetted caregivers for hire, combined with a care management app that allows them to monitor that care, communicate with the caregivers, delegate tasks, and monitor whether those tasks have been performed from wherever they are. So this is in recognition that in modern times, not every family member lives close to their parent, but we all worry about our parents.
Of course, of course. I know
Yeah.
for myself, I just went through last year of flying back and forth to Ontario and helping care for my dad. He was living independently. Now,
Hmm.
as it turned out, we needed to actually get him a lot of help, and I had to move in. But just
Hmm.
prior to that, I was at a point where I was like, how do I support him just having the occasional caregiver? And I know there's lots of different agencies out there,
Right.
but there is a lot of where people hire privately. And if I
Hmm.
understand correctly, this is a way of people being able to hire a private caregiver, but they know it, they're already vetted, and you help match them
Yeah.
together. I can
Right.
now, maybe I shouldn't liken this, but when I hear of this, it reminds me a bit of like a holiday home app where you have somebody that has a holiday home and you have someone looking for it. Now it's
Right.
somebody as a caregiver, they go on and they apply, or do you go out and
Yes.
recruit, or how does that work?
So they apply. We have certain recruiting channels through the colleges where they get their diploma or degree. We
Okay.
also post on the job board. So our initial contact with a caregiver is through their application, and we take them through a rigorous vetting process. So for us, vetting is key. We've made a deliberate decision not to allow just anyone to sign up as a caregiver
Absolutely. Okay.
or a helper. And so we take them through a resume check to make sure they have Canadian home care or senior care experience. We do an aptitude test, a couple of job reference checks, a criminal background check, and then an interview before they even meet the
Wow.
client. And so that all takes place before the match with the client happens. And then once they're matched,
Hmm.
let's say a family is looking for a caregiver and there's certain parameters around the
Hmm.
situation and certain desired characteristics or days and times. So there might be multiple candidates that meet those criteria. So
Hmm.
they could interview, and this is also key, they would interview the candidates and be able to
Oh, okay.
choose.
Oh,
And
that's
so through
fantastic.
our model, we really want to have the family have visibility control over the selection process, but know that we vetted them. And we found that this way, both the caregiver and the family are much happier.
Well, they feel like they have some control. I
Yeah,
know that through the process we went through experience and from other friends, one of the issues that happens is as a family, it's often you're like, okay, I need this help. And then you just get sent someone. And I
right.
know that agencies do their best to try and match that same person upcoming,
Yeah,
but it doesn't always work. And the government funded programs as well, you might just you might be getting someone different all the time. And I know that can be very upsetting when you're it's hard enough for seniors to say, I'm at the point now I can't do this for myself. It can be a real blow to their we don't want to have a blow to their dignity. It can be really hard on the ego.
right.
And I wouldn't mind maybe steering the conversation that way a little bit is how what advice would you give for families who have a senior that they want to give support to? How do they even broach that topic? Because I know I have friends whose parents are like, oh, I'm fine. I'm living in my house all by myself. But they think they're taking care of everything, but they're actually not taking care of everything. And the
Yeah,
family's trying to do as much as they can. Do you have any advice on how do you broach these subjects?
yeah, absolutely. The best advice I can give is to start the conversation early. And we've heard that lots. Like, that's probably a very common piece of advice. But start the conversation when there's no panic or need to
Yeah.
make any quick decisions, because ultimately you
Mm,
want your parent to feel like it's their decision. So you want to actually plant the seed early and have a really casual conversation about whatever it is that you're concerned about. And prior to your first conversation, you might actually want to do some research as well so that you can
okay.
have an intelligent conversation with your parent about the options if the conversation actually goes that way. Um, so, baby steps. Start the conversation early about little things like, can we get someone to help you mow the lawn? Can we get someone to help
Right.
clean once a week or a couple times a month? So those are, or get groceries delivered. Like, pick the things that aren't as intrusive, um,
Right.
as, for example, helping with showering or medications. So think of what are the little things that has the most or the highest probability of agreement from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And usually, how things often start is if the family, the adult children, do live close by, it's often the children who start doing these tasks first. You go
Right.
over to figure out why the remote's not working, change a light bulb, drop off
Yeah.
groceries, bring over extra food that you've made. So, it's very, very common for these tasks to be done by one of the adult children, but then as the needs evolve, then to transition those housekeeping tasks and chores to a professional.
Right. Right. I can see that coming over and like, hey, I'll help you with the garden, or let's work on the garden and the mowing together. And then as you move maybe inside and have to help more with personal care, it's like, okay, let's get somebody else to do those
Yeah,
tasks and transitioning that way. Because it certainly can be a challenge making that shift. Um, any extra advice? I mean, I love your advice on
yeah,
start early before it's
yeah,
needed.
yeah,
Because when it's needed, it can be like, oh, that can be a really difficult one. Because when you wait until it's absolutely needed, sometimes it's too
yeah.
hard to pull together. And it's actually a transition out of the home into some sort of facility, which
Right.
for some people is a really viable, wonderful option. But I think the
Yeah.
starting the conversation early and
Mhm.
really early saying, do you want to be in your own home? Do you want
Mhm.
to get support in your and stay in your own home? Or are you
Right.
wanting to go live in a seniors building, which can actually
Right.
have lots of fun activities and so forth? But a lot of people want that option of staying in their home and they just don't know how to make it happen.
Right. I think also everyone lives their lives in chapters, I like to think. And so
Mm.
in a particular chapter, the best solution really is to stay at home.
Mhm.
There might come a chapter in someone's life where a group living environment is the best solution. And so I want families to be open to different solutions at different points in the parent's life.
Yes. Yeah. That totally
Yeah.
makes sense. I'll be honest, I with my own father, just bringing it in there because that's the most recent, experience I've had, is we always thought, "We'll just keep him at home." And
Right.
and and that would work and bring in extra support. But and I want to touch base on this, the challenge became when there became memory issues or a small amount of dementia, that is
Right.
trickier because then they can't be on their own in between moments. So
Right.
how is that something like, do you have clients
Yeah.
that have dementia, or is that the
Yeah.
line where something else has to be done?
Yeah. So, as dementia progresses, it's very common, and you're absolutely right. Family members worry about the parent being alone for any amount of time. And so,
Yeah.
as those needs escalate and you bring on caregivers for more and more hours during the day, you eventually get up to full time care. And then
Right.
you go from full time care to maybe a live in. And so, one of the common reasons I see for someone to go from home into assisted living or long term care is simply the home care costs are getting too expensive
Right.
because
Right.
private 24/7 can care can get very, very pricey.
Yeah.
So cost definitely is one of the 2 or 3 main reasons I see commonly for people to move. The other is simply caregiver burnout, and that's one of
Right.
the things we're trying to change. Is we see spousal caregivers or the adult children just
Yeah.
getting burnt out, and in some cases, it's not a matter of the money. It's just um, it's gotten too much for them. The person's living at risk. The family members just have hit their boundaries in terms of the amount of time and energy that they can devote. And so, in those cases, we see moves to long term care as well, just for the
Right.
safety and
So
well
I
being for the
see
person.
the magic sweet spot of the services that you provide, or, there could be other similar services. I don't even know. I hadn't heard of this particular type of service before. So I
Hmm.
like, great on you. I want to see this go all over North America.
Yeah, right.
I there's a sweet spot where people are just, they're still mentally with it and capacity, which we can, like, a lot of people think of, we lose our mental capacities as we age, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just that there's
No.
higher incidence of dementia as you get older. But if you don't have an actual illness, a dementia of some sort, you can have a really bright sharp mind going well into 80s and 90s. But we all start to, at some point in time, have less capacity in our physical being. So that wonderful sweet spot where somebody has a home, they want to stay in it, and they just need that extra help.
Hmm.
You were mentioning how family can come in for a bit, but I can also see how having a caregiver come in, or services like you offer, can actually keep that client feeling more independent. Like,
Hmm.
especially if it's presented in a way of, not, we're sending someone in to take care of things because you can't. It's like, you're
Right.
now the CEO of your own care. And now
Right.
you have this. And this is what we kept telling my dad. I said, we're your minions. You're the
Yeah.
boss. We're the minions. We're just doing the
Yeah.
work. And that actually shifted. So that would be a hint from me, is shift to say, you're the boss still. What is it that you want doing? Now we'll do the work for you.
Right.
And I don't know if, if you have certain ways of saying this is how you present it to your parents or your loved ones.
I think that's a great way to look at it is that they're the boss, they're there to help you. It's not because you can't do it. It's
Right.
because, you can spend more time doing the things you enjoy.
Right.
Absolutely. And also the nice thing is if we a really good match um is not just based on experience, skills, and availability, but it's on personality as well. So if you get the
Mhm.
right personality match, um, the parent actually starts really enjoying the company
Mhm.
of the companion or caregiver. And, we see lots of cases where they become friends. And over
Mhm.
time, because our model promotes consistency, it's like the same person coming every day. There's no
Yes.
switching from one person to another. And through that consistency, they get to really know the caregiver. And we've seen lots of cases where they become very close friends. It's almost like the caregiver becomes a member of the family. The senior looks forward to seeing the caregiver. And so it's a really nice enrichment of their life.
Yeah. I just had, as you were talking, I had a flash from the scenes of Driving Miss Daisy. I love
Ah,
that movie. Just that the development of the relationship that can,
right.
I think that's encouraging that sometimes it can start off like a little guarded and, by the end is like a really warm, loving relationship,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And yeah, but now I want to change the focus to you for a moment. I'm curious,
Okay.
like, what got you into this? How did you come
Well,
to be the owner and come up with this concept?
yeah. So I have an interesting origin story. I had a very big career change in my 30s. So I started off in a completely different career. I started off as a lawyer, went through
Mm.
university, have a business degree, got a law degree, um, thinking, I wanted to practice law for ever. And, um, and I realized early on in my articling year and my first year that it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Okay.
That um, surprise, surprise, the practice of law was very different from law school. Can you believe it? And so,
I've heard that about a lot of different careers.
right. But I mean, joking aside, I think in any industry or practice or craft, there's an excitement of anyone starting their career because you're in your 20s, you're learning lots, you're suddenly making your own money, you're being challenged and learning every day, so there's this experience curve that's very exciting. And once you get to the peak and you're not learning as much every day, but you're just practicing that craft or skill or profession, you really have to enjoy it if you're going to do it the rest of your life, because
Mhm.
that excitement and novelty has worn off. And so for me, I just knew it wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And so what happened was this idea came about through kind of indirectly. Um, of helping seniors with
Mhm.
initially the idea was housing placement, actually. So home to home initially, as you can kind of guess from the name, was around helping them transition from their former or current home to a new home and all the
Mhm.
decisions that are involved in that. And so we still do
Yeah,
that.
that's
So we
huge.
navigate the senior housing system both on the public side and the private side,
Okay.
and we have a transition team that helps them downsize and do all of that. We also do care navigation and care management. So that's how it came about. Is when the idea came, I just felt like it was my calling, and it was
Mhm.
this feeling I couldn't describe really.
Mhm.
That it felt right, and I knew internally that I had to pursue this. And that it would be worth leaving law for, because I didn't want to just leave law for anything. And so, as although the first few years were really difficult, I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
It's
Um,
pretty challenging starting a new
it's
business, and you
oh
have this concept and you can see it in the future, but those first few years, you have to be
yeah,
pretty darn tenacious.
the first 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. It was difficult. Made a lot of mistakes in that first business. If I could do it all over again, there'd be some major things I'd do differently. But got through it, and then it's what people say about having kids. You forget the pain, and then you decide, oh, maybe I'll start a second one, and and so
Love it.
my care base came about because through the 16 years of experience in helping families with healthcare navigation, I saw how the existing model of home care was a little bit outdated. There were many
Mhm.
gaps between the public and private system where families weren't being served, and seniors were going to long term care unnecessarily or too early.
I totally get that. That where if there was something missing, right? Like that
Yeah.
gap. And that was going to be one of my questions is, maybe on even a more global question, what do you see
Mhm.
in the gap? Like what gaps do you see right now in
Mm,
senior? And this is
yeah,
mostly your experience obviously is within Canada, but I imagine that other countries around the world and
right.
the States that they face similar problems depending on how the structure is set up in their given state
Yeah.
or province.
The main gap I see, that is a systemic problem is actually implied in the statistic that you started off the podcast with, which is why is there such a high percentage of older adults who have a chronic condition, yet such a low percentage taking advantage of the public home care system? And the
Yeah.
reason I believe is the public health system is focused on personal care. So our health authorities provide community care for people who need things like medication administration, help with what are called activities of daily living, which are, getting dressed, showering, grooming and
Yeah.
hygiene, and so forth. But if you were to take a look at the average senior, chronic condition or no chronic condition, and how they age and what they typically need help with. People with a chronic condition, so let's take arthritis or a heart condition or anything. Um, Typically, it's the house chores and housekeeping,
Yeah.
driving to appointments, cooking nutritious meals, um, those kind of things that people need help with first. Um, you don't go from being completely independent to suddenly needing help with a shower.
Yes.
So
No,
it's
unless you've had some sort of
yes.
surgery or injury or something along
Yeah,
those lines.
something
Yeah.
something unexpected, but in the natural spectrum of aging, people need help with the home care tasks around, nutritious meals, medications, cleaning, doing laundry, companionship, that kind of thing.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
those are things that the health authority, they do medications, but other than that, they don't do house chores, appointments, cooking,
Right,
companionship. And so I think that's why there's so many seniors that don't qualify or not partaking in the public healthcare services. That's a big gap. You have to go privately to find
right,
that kind of help. So I think
right.
that's the main gap because right off the bat, you
Yeah,
have to spend money to
yeah.
pay 100% of the costs associated with home care.
Right, right. Yeah, I can see, and this could get into a whole big conversation on would it be worth the government funding, even if they don't fund it fully,
Yeah,
to actually help fill that gap because it's more expensive once you put somebody into a nursing home or some sort of home at some point until you're
right,
at the point, as you said, if you need round the clock care, then it becomes more economical to actually go
right.
into a facility versus at home.
Yeah,
So, as you were talking, my thought was without a service like you provide, um, y- people are really looking at, I need to find somebody that takes me to my appointments. I might get a delivery service, but I might have somebody come in and do the laundry or somebody come in and clean the house. And all of it is if you have all these different individuals, that's a lot of coordination and that
hmm,
can leave seniors at risk because of all these different people coming in and out. And
right,
so I can see that something where you have like one person or two different people that are set up as your main caregivers and providers
right,
that are willing to do a broader scope of activities,
right.
that really fills in that gap that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you get that consistency is so key
Yeah.
because it's very disruptive to see a different person or not knowing the anxiety of the anticipation of who's coming today. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
consistency is key. And that's one of the things we really try to promote. It's very similar to hiring a nanny for your kids. You would never imagine having a different nanny come every day to take your kids,
Exactly.
to take care of your
Exactly.
kids while you're at work, right? So
Exactly.
it's very similar.
I can see this being very comforting, especially as you said, like, so if, say, a senior, you're in the Vancouver area. So if a senior's in the Vancouver area, but the child or the family lives in a different city, knowing and being able to communicate, and even the convenience of being able to communicate on an app, here's the tasks I want. I can what's coming to mind as well is if you take it from the point of view of the caregiver, they're coming in, they're getting to know that client. They'll be able to see
Mhm.
when there's subtle changes. They'll be able
Right.
to come and go, Martha doesn't seem right today, and be able to reach out to
Exactly.
the family. I think that is so vitally important.
That's a great point.
And
You're right.
yeah, yeah. Um, eh, I know we've talked about this, but I want to highlight in a nutshell, a bit of a summary. How are you different? Your services, how are they different than what is out there?
Well, I think we're different in a few different ways. I would say the way we're using technology, we haven't talked much about our platform, but I think how we're building technology in-house. We're not reliant on a
Oh,
third-party
okay.
system and trying to make it work for us. We actually have built from scratch our entire platform
Oh.
to help families first of all, find the ideal caregiver quickly. So we have algorithms and we have innovative ways of how we do the match to find that ideal caregiver quickly. And then the care management platform we've built in house to help that person seamlessly go from finding and hiring that caregiver to now, okay, let's delegate what they're supposed to do on the shift. There's messaging within the platform. You invite the family members, and everyone's
Mm,
a member of this care circle and can see what's going
mm,
on. Um, and so one that's one of the ways we're different is how we're using technology and being tech forward in envisioning what the future of home care could look like. Secondly, something I mentioned is we vet. We have very high vetting standards, and we have
mhm.
some other service marketplaces that are like us that don't do any vetting, which is scary
Oh,
because
so they're just a
you,
match. Oh,
yeah, so
like they
you,
just
it's,
match people up?
yes, or it's completely self-serve where you go on and it's like the Amazon of care, and you can pick service
Okay.
providers, and we have a lot of customer support. We're a little over the top in basically cherry picking the ideal candidates for every client. The third way we're different is client has complete selection and control. They get the
Amazing.
final say on who the caregiver is. If they don't feel someone is the right fit, no questions asked. Um, I mean, they can meet caregivers prior to the first shift. And
Okay.
most other companies in the industry are not doing that.
That is, I believe, a very wonderful model. Like knowing a little bit about this area, I think it's a model that I want to see take off across the country.
Thank you.
Now, yeah. Now, before we start to sign off, I want to let everyone know that you can get lots more information in the show notes, and the link to your websites will be there
Thank you.
as well. But you mentioned resources. So I want to just pick on that. So if somebody doesn't live in your area and they're going, oh, this doesn't apply to me, but actually you have lots of resource, you have lots of blogs,
Yeah.
and I know that you've kindly done a blog that's going to be on the Fabulous at 50 website shortly as well. And it might even be up there now. We'll double check on that. And just tell us if somebody when someone, let's just say when everyone that's listening goes to your website to check out what you have, what might they find there?
In addition to the marketplace, we have a resource hub. And no
Yep.
matter where you live, certain things are common across all provinces or countries. For example, we have white papers on home safety. How can you make
Okay.
the home safer for your parent? What are some common safety adjustments, modifications, or renos that you could do? So we have a guide on that. Um, we have a guide on how to deal with family dynamics and resistance and all like kind of the softer
Mhm.
elements of being a family caregiver. We have
Right.
caregiver training. And so
Oh,
this
okay.
is equally applicable to um, professional caregivers as well as family caregivers. If you're performing caregiving tasks for your parent, I mean, aside from, doing laundry and grocery shopping, but if you want to learn about memory care, dementia care, if you want to learn about how to help them in the bathroom, we've actually partnered with a very large caregiver training institute. And they have
Okay.
online courses. And I believe those skills, I mean, it doesn't matter whether your parent lives in Ontario, Alberta, or BC. If you're helping them in the bathroom, you're helping them get out of bed, if you're helping them get dressed, you want to learn more about Alzheimer's and what that might look like 2 years from where your parent currently is now. These are great courses, and they're not long courses, and you can do them at your own pace. And so in the hub, we have a link to our partner training institute to take those courses.
That's fantastic. I just learned something new as well. We didn't even touch
Yeah,
base on that. That's even more resources than I was expecting, which is wonderful because I'm sure there's people that just are like, I haven't been trained for this. This isn't my area. I work in, I don't know, IT. I'm not a caregiver. I'm not a nurse. I'm not, but you don't need to be. You need to have
right.
a caring, loving heart and find the resources in your area. So, um, I want to say a couple things before we sign off. So, Stephanie, I really feel your heart in your business here. It's very much a heart forward, and I think that's what people are looking for these days.
Hmm.
It's also you're very smart, and just touching into your background, the fact that you were a lawyer and did business, you've been able to pull all of this together and use it. And I think this is really important for um I think our community that sometimes go, oh, I've left a career. I've want to be doing something else, and we can take those resources. Like they're never wasted. You left law in the traditional, but I bet beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have been using your law skills in your business and putting it together. So, all of that is quite amazing. And I think when we pool our desire to support others and we take our background initiatives and education and do things like this, it's wonderful. So before we sign off, what I want to do is pick your brain on three pearls of wisdom or advice you have.
Hmm.
I'm actually going to get six from you, and I'll tell you why. I would love three suggestions that you have for someone that's considering becoming a caregiver. Maybe they're not a caregiver
Caregiver.
yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, so your caregivers that are coming in, like what if somebody's sitting there going, I want something different. It might be a woman that's an empty
Hmm.
nester or changing career and they want to do something and they haven't been a caregiver necessarily or they have experience. What can they do to get into the caregiver field?
My first piece of advice, the first thing I think of is try to talk to someone who's in that field already. And actually, this is good advice for anyone seeking, thinking about getting into any career. Go talk to some people who are doing it,
Great.
and get a diverse set of opinions around their experiences because it may not be all as rosy as you think.
Right.
um, and that's true of any job, actually. There's
Yeah.
a lot of things that may come up that you don't expect that would be great to know in advance. um, Second is really think about why you're in it, and what your own boundaries are. And third, look into what training you can. Um, if you don't have the experience, then you may need some training to build up those credentials. We have some caregivers who have 20, 30 years of experience but don't have the formal PSW or HCA diploma, and their experience makes up for that by far. So I don't care that they don't have that original diploma. Maybe they just never had a chance to go to school. But if you're going new into the field, um, the education around getting that diploma is not that onerous. It's a 9-month program in most provinces, and so look into that.
Excellent. I just think it's a wonderful area. We're going to need this more and more.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a wonderful job, especially when I'm hearing you can maybe set your hours. Like if on say something like your platform, you go, I'm
Hmm.
available for 10 hours a week. Like,
Right.
what a difference that will give to
Yeah.
having somebody feel like they are have meaningful work.
Right.
Now, what would be your three best pieces of advice for families or people that are dealing with elderly loved ones or looking to get care?
My three pieces of advice. So, first is something we've already discussed, which is, do your research early, plan ahead, and have the
Yes.
conversation early.
Yes.
The second is this. I think a lot of families have to acknowledge that what you might want for your parent is perhaps different from what they want for themselves. I see a
Mhm.
lot of families struggling with um, thinking that certain things should be happening for mom or dad, but they're either resistant or they actually just don't agree.
Yeah.
And so there's this role reversal that everyone goes through kind of when you start caring for aging parents. And so just remember that it ultimately is still their decision.
Right.
Um, third piece of advice. Um, I think good communication and coordination is really important, and being prepared for unexpected events because inevitably, in most cases, something unexpected is going to happen. And so, if you prepare in advance, so for example, everyone should have a power of attorney at any age. Actually, I have one
Yes.
because you never know when something might happen. So, um, one way to be prepared for the unexpected is to get that power of attorney in place. And there's a whole other conversation to have
I
around
was
who do
gonna
you pick?
say, I just
Who do
had I'm like, I'm having you back on because
Yeah,
I think a whole conversation on having a will, having your power
yeah,
of attorney, having, because there's different you can give power for like more financial things is different than
yes,
who is your decision maker if you can't make decisions for your health. So those three
yes,
things, and I think
exactly.
I think this is a
Yeah.
really good segue into another
I would love
conversation that I think
to, yeah, I would love to
you're
come on
really
again.
set up for
So,
that.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
that whole topic is called incapacity planning. Generally, that's what people refer to
Okay.
it. So it's around who do you pick as a power of attorney? What can they do and not do? Who do you pick as, in BC, we call it a healthcare rep? What can they do? What they can't do? How do they two work together? Because there's practical implications of if you're choosing two different people. Um,
Yes.
Certain decisions can fall through the cracks. So do you point the same person? What do you have? What do you have? What if you have 4 or 5 kids? Who do you choose? And then
Right.
having a will and estate planning. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
I feel like we just did a commercial for one of our
Yeah,
next
yeah,
podcasts.
exactly.
Excellent. Well, Stephanie, I know that you have a busy schedule and you're doing amazing work in the world. So thank you so much for being on today's podcast. And again, everyone that's listening, check out the show notes. And if you have any questions, there'll be contact information there. And people can reach out to you or myself to find out some more information. And I would say I'm going to add with my one little pearl, having gone through this twice with both of my parents separately, is remember you're also their loved one, right? Sometimes we
Yeah,
can get too caught up in the busyness of the caregiving.
yeah,
Remember to simply be there with them and enjoy
right.
them.
Yes,
Yeah. Well, have a
good
wonderful day,
advice.
everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. But before you leave, I'm curious. What pearl of wisdom are you taking away from today's episode? I do hope it held some inspiration or information for you to live your best life. If you are not yet part of our sisterhood, I invite you to join our community by visiting our website, fabulousat50.com, and you'll receive a free copy of our ebook, Make Mine Fabulous 21 Ways to Energize Your Life. It is packed with loads of tips and tricks. Plus, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review to let us know what you think. Remember, keep choosing fabulous. It's never too late to live the life you deserve. Catch you on the next episode.